What is going on, YouTube, Lamont at large? Today we are at the scene of the crime in Abilene, Texas. I'm here to talk about the unsolved murder of Jennifer Servo. Now, when you hear that name, Servo, a pretty unusual name, it might ring a bell. You're thinking to yourself, Servo, Servo, Servo. Well, if you're a fan of true crime, then you remember this case from about almost 20 years ago. Jennifer Servo was a young 22-year-old female who had went to school in Montana to be a news reporter. She, in her own words, quote, wanted to be the next Katie Couric. She had the chops and she definitely had the looks. Doesn't hurt to have the looks when you want to be into television media and what have you. She was working part-time as a reporter for a local news affiliate in Montana, and she finally hit it big, quote unquote. She landed a full-time gig at KRBC News here in Abilene, Texas. At the time when she was living in Montana, she was dating a man by the name of Ralph Sepulveda, and she tells Ralph, hey, I got a job down in Texas. And he says, well, I guess I'll move down there with you. Okay, cool. Hey, let's move down. So the lovebirds moved down to Texas, and not long after she was here, she found out a little something about Ralph. He wasn't quite who he said he was. Come to find out, he was actually engaged to be married to a woman back in Montana, and to make matters a little worse, he had a child with this woman. So she immediately cuts ties with Ralph. She starts her new gig and she starts dating a man who was the weatherman at the time by the name of Travers. Things are going good. Ralph is in the rearview mirror. She totally cut it off with him. So on the evening of September 16, 2002, Jennifer and Brian, they're driving together. They go to a friend's house to pick up a coffee table that they no longer wanted, or they sold to her, what have you. After they picked up the table, they went to Walmart. As they were driving to Walmart, Jennifer tells Brian, hey, I think somebody's following us. And he says, well, what are you talking about? She says, there's a vehicle behind us, there's a car, and they've been following us for a while. Now, it's whether you want to believe this article or that article, but it seems that Brian kind of brushed it off. Maybe she seemed a little bit nervous, maybe he didn't know, but he shrugs it off. They go to Walmart, they make their purchases, they come back. She drops him off at his place. He offered to walk her back to her car. She declined the offer. She goes home. That is the last anybody seen of her. She's supposed to go to work the following day or two later, and she doesn't show up for work. They call the police to do a welfare check at her apartment, and this is the news station where she used to work at. So these guys, they're listening to the scanner because they called the police, and over the scanner they could hear the police radio that they found a dead body in the apartment. And according to the witnesses that were at the station at the time listening to the scanner, one of the women just let out a blood-curdling scream. It was the body of Jennifer Servo. She had been found dead. She had been found beaten and strangled. Now we're gonna go to the scene of where her body was found, because this is where the case doesn't really have too many twists and turns, but it does have a sense of whodunit for sure. And here we are at the former residence of Jennifer Servo. So let's talk really quickly about possible motives, possible suspects in this case. Well, it's a short list. There's really only two possible suspects. That would be Brian Travers, the weatherman who Jennifer has just started dating, and Ralph Sepulveda, scorned lover. Now, going over the detective notes in the case after them interviewing everybody at her work and everybody that lived in this apartment complex, a couple facts of the case came out. Number one, reaction to the news of Jennifer's murder. They approached Brian and Ralph separately, and their reactions to hearing that Jennifer had been murdered were polar opposites. Brian was very, very emotionally distraught. However, Ralph was very stoic, if that's the word to use, very calm. He just looked at them and didn't ask them what happened. Now, normally, if you are a normal person and you hear such a tragedy occurring where a loved one of yours was murdered, the first thing that goes through your mind is probably what happened. You're distraught, you're crying, you want to see them, you want answers. It was none of that coming from Ralph Sepulveda. Let's talk about their alibis. Both of their alibis are not airtight. They can't provide any proof of where they were at the time of the murder, because they were both at their apartments. There's no receipts. There's no, oh, I was at a movie or I was with my friends. You have none of that. When the detectives were talking to Jennifer's co-workers at the station, one of her co-workers that the detectives were talking to had indicated that Jennifer told her that she hadn't seen Ralph in about, say, 3 weeks or so. And also she told the detectives an interesting little tidbit about their sex life. Jennifer had confided to her that Ralph liked it during sex when he choked her. It turned him on, I guess. Now, that's none of my business what people do behind closed doors. You know, at the end of the day, people are vanilla. I don't know. That doesn't mean he killed her, but that is a bit, it's an eyebrow raiser. I'll just leave it at that. But also, let's talk about Brian Travers. Now, when Jennifer told him that she thought that they were being followed, and he pretty much really didn't think much about it, when the detectives were going through her phone records, they noticed that she had called an ex-boyfriend of hers in Montana. When they contacted him, he told them that she never mentioned anything about a suspicious car following them. You would think that would come up in a conversation. So you're thinking to yourself, well, maybe Brian lied. Maybe he just said that about a car following them to kind of throw off the detectives. Here's the thing, though. You're not really going to call an ex-boyfriend and tell him, oh, you're with a man that you're dating, and then your ex-boyfriend might have been following you guys, or whatever's going through your head at that point in time. So Brian has an alibi that's not airtight. Ralph has an alibi that's not airtight. Let's talk about the DNA evidence. Well, Ralph's DNA was found in the apartment. However, they lived together, and Brian had been to her apartment multiple times. His DNA was there too. And the people that gathered the DNA evidence, they said that it had been tainted because Jennifer had a cat. So the cat hair would have been mixed up with the human hair, so forth and so on. And everything's a mess. Could there be a third person responsible for this murder? Highly unlikely. Detectives feel they know who killed her, yet they just don't have enough evidence to get a warrant and charge that person with her murder. As far as I know, she was cremated and there is no place of burial. This unsolved murder has been plaguing the Abilene Police Department for many years now. And this is the building where Jennifer used to live. And if you can see in those two corner apartments, the apartment on your right next to that window, that is where Jennifer Servo used to live, and that is where she was murdered. Right there. Very sad. A very young woman, had a life ahead of her, had a very bright career. Who knows, right now, if she were alive, we could be watching her on, NBC Nightly News or on Fox News or what have you. And she definitely had to look for network TV, to say the least. And her life was cut short by possibly one of those two men. And I would definitely say that the evidence would point closer to Ralph Sepulveda. He eventually stopped cooperating with the police, and that's it. That's all there is to it. This unsolved murder has now gone on for almost 20 years. And is it an unsolved murder that will ever be solved? Who knows at the end of the day? Who knows? If anybody has any information about the unsolved murder of Jennifer Servo, please call the Abilene Police Department Homicide Unit 325-673-8331. 325-673-8331. I am Lamont at large, always at the scene of the crime. I'll see you on the next vlog. Catch up with you later. Peace out.